We are going to do a different video today. We are going to go to the book in the Old New Testament called the Book of Acts. That follows all of the four Gospels. It's the very next book. And the one who wrote one of the Gospels, Luke, probably wrote this as well. But the book of Acts has much to do also with those who became apostles who went out in the world to teach what they had learned from Jesus or from some of his followers. Now, the book of Acts, of course, is very interesting in many ways. There was one particular verse that, in itself, as is often the case with verses of the Bible, has a few words in it that are very interesting, sometimes confusing, sometimes revealing something that you don't think you really understand too well. So, what I'm going to do is make some videos on the book of Acts, chapter 10, and verse 34 and 35, which are the important verses. So, this will be called Acts 10, and this being the first one will be 1, and it will be in the seminary folder rather than the Bible folder. I think the seminary folder is more important, and you'll see why in a little while. So, what we're going to do first, as we often do, is use a few Bibles to give you some idea of what they make of this particular verse. So we're going to take first the Voice Bible, which we have used before. As I say, that's the same as the Compass Bible. And this one is done in a certain way so you know who's speaking, and they give the best translation that they can. So listen carefully, because this is the beginning of that section in chapter 10 of Acts that has some very interesting words. This is what I'm talking about. Now, this is Peter speaking. Now, don't forget, Peter was with Cornelius before this happened, and in Rome and all that area, there are all kinds of conflicts between different groups of people, especially the Jews and the Protestants and others. So this has to do with much of that and what Peter came to be like. So now I will read you out of this Voice Bible these two verses, and this says in front of it, Peter, it is clear to me now that God plays no favorites, that God accepts every person, whatever his or her culture or ethnic group, that God welcomes all who revere him and do right. You already know that God sent a message to the people of Israel, and so on, so on. But notice that 34 and 35. Isn't that interesting? Because you find there that Peter says something very interesting. He says, God accepts every person. God plays no favorites. Now, we have heard before in the Bible that there are people that are favored. For example, the Jews consider themselves the favored people who were chosen specifically by God to be a light to all the other nations and to follow all of God's commandments to make that light visible. But here, Peter, who is also a Jew, goes against his own background by saying that God plays no favorites, that God accepts every person, whatever his cultural or ethnic background, that God welcomes to sit with him and revere him. And you already know that God sent a messenger to the people of Israel. It was a message of peace, peace through Jesus, the Anointed One, who is King of all people. All right. Now, we are going to take some other Bibles and read you how they interpret these two verses. And then we will get into why, in particular, we are using this. We will continue momentarily.